Good morning, fellow pilgrims, friends and neighbors. Thank you for joining us this Tuesday morning, April 28th, 2020. I'm Patrick Horn with Pilgrim Congregational Church, and this is our daily devotional. We have been for some time now in Acts chapter 2, and today we're looking specifically at verse 43, Acts chapter 2, verse 43. Very briefly, this is an account of what's happening with the early converts to Christianity and to the early church. And in this verse, we get a little bit of information about that context. So we're going to be reading Acts chapter 2, verse 43, and I'll be reading from the Revised Standard Version. And fear came upon every soul, and many wonders and signs were done through the apostles. So I have a couple of reflections for us this morning. We've talked a good bit over the last few weeks about being able to see signs and wonders from God. And signs and wonders are generally referred to as miracles, but I have tried to get us to look at signs and wonders in a different way than sometimes is conceived of when we talk of miracles. A lot of times when we speak of miracles, we tend to think of things that are only those things which somehow defy the laws of nature and cannot otherwise be explained. But I don't think this is the right sort of approach because, of course, what counts as a scientific explanation changes quite a lot through the years depending on the development of science. So I think that that probably the main thing that we've learned about signs and wonders is that it has to do with how we see the world. So it has a lot to do with our, if not everything to do with our relationship with God. And so this morning I have a couple of reflections about the relationship between signs and wonders and this idea of fear that we read about in verse 43. We read that fear came upon every soul. And I do think that in this context, there are two uses of fear that we're acquainted with, and I think both come into play here. One is more like what we would call awe, that is, being awestruck by the wonder of something, and very, very closely related to being overwhelmed by what we're looking at. Fear in the sense of awe, being awestruck. Perhaps there's something like standing on the edge of the Grand Canyon and having a few seconds of vertigo, or being overwhelmed by the vastness of it, the largeness of it, that sort of feeling. There's a great scene in a crazy movie I think I've referred to before, a Tom Hanks movie that actually did not do very well. It's Joe versus the Volcano, and it's kind of a silly movie, but there is this scene where he's on a raft in the middle of nowhere, and the moon rises up out of the ocean, and he's very dehydrated, but he rises and he raises his hands and then falls to his knees and begins to pray. And it's a beautiful scene because I do think it expresses this idea of being awestruck. Perhaps it's a little challenging for us to experience awe in our day and time. But there's also this other conception of fear, which I think is actually being afraid for ourselves. And in the early church and in Acts, we have references to the power of God. In fact, there's a story about Ananias and his wife who fall over dead, essentially because they have not only been lying, but they've been hypocritical about their generosity. And there is, of course, one way to take that, which is that, the Lord will strike you down at any moment if you don't stay in line. I don't think that's the right way to take it. I don't think it makes much sense in the context of Peter's life and the fact that he made these horrible mistakes himself and was given other opportunities to ask for forgiveness. So I think fear in this sense, I think, really needs to be understood as fear of what might become of us without God. That is, a fear that without God, my life, what my life would become without God, the kind of person that I would become without God, one who is focused on the self and selfishness, and so a sort of fear that has to do with the state of my soul. And I think that is more of what is being expressed here, the connection between wonders and signs from God and fear that came upon every soul. And the sort of fear that is being talked about here, I believe, is this fear concerning what would happen to you if you were separated from God, and how horrible that would be, and the kind of person that you would become. And I know for myself that I do feel that fear, that it is a horrible thought of the kind of person that I would be without God in my life and without the grace of Jesus Christ. So let's close with a prayer. O light that burns and heals, O love that breaks and soothes the heart, O life that stirs and satisfies, how shall we endure thee? We have prayed so carelessly that thou wouldst show us thy love, forgetting that angels veiled themselves before thee. We have longed to look upon the beauty of thy countenance, not considering whether anything would ever seem so fair again. We have sought to know all mysteries and never stayed to ask if we had fortitude to bear the truth. We have desired to follow after Christ, counting not his lonely way, his utter sacrifice, his broken heart. And now we've come at length to apprehend what such answered prayers might mean. Yet with the clearer light we dare to ask them all again, and answer them even though we do not fully know. For we are tired of twilight, falsehood, and the easy way. Tremblingly we place ourselves in thy hands. Lead us by thy love into fuller light and to more glorious life. Amen. Thank you for joining us this morning from Pilgrim Congregational Church. I'm Patrick Warren. I look forward to sharing with you each day, and I hope you have a wonderful day today. Goodbye.